Scott Agnes wasn't just another face in the press room. He was a reporter Caitlin Clark refused to acknowledge. During a recent press conference, the contrast was impossible to ignore. Clark's tone was warm and engaging with one journalist, then turned ice cold when she locked eyes with Agnes. It wasn't a slip. It was a message. Weeks earlier, Agnes had published sensitive details about Clark's injury and took aim at her fan base, painting them in a divisive light.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
That move cost him. Her refusal to interact wasn't a tantrum. It was calculated, signaling a shift in how athletes control the media relationship on their terms. Clark's disengagement with Agnes marks more than a personal fallout. It's a signal flare in a larger transformation of athlete media dynamics. In a sports world where access used to be a reporter's tool, the roles have begun to reverse. Athletes like Clark are now choosing who gets to tell their stories and how. And when a journalist crosses a boundary, revealing off-limits details or crafting narratives that feel hostile, there's no need for formal statements. A cold stare or a clipped answer is enough to change the tone of an entire room. This moment reveals that media coverage is no longer just about questions and answers. It's about power, trust, and leverage. Caitlin Clark just sent a message, loud and clear, and whether you're a journalist, a fan, or just someone watching the press room chaos unfold, the fallout was impossible to miss. One look, one icy tone, and suddenly a sports reporter found himself very publicly shut out and soon after, unemployed. This isn't your standard athlete snaps at media moment. This was a masterclass in control, a silent power play, and a glimpse into the new rules of the sports media game. Because Caitlin Clark didn't just answer a question with attitude. She pulled off a professional freeze-out that's now sparking a conversation way bigger than one awkward press conference. Here's what went down. It started during a post-game press conference. Nothing unusual, until Clark walked in, sat down, and faced a familiar sea of reporters. One of them was Scott Agnes, a journalist who, not long before, had published sensitive details about her team, specifically about an injury the team had kept under wraps. On top of that, he'd made some less than flattering comments about Clark's famously loyal fan base. So when he raised his hand to ask a question, everyone was watching, including Clark. What happened next? Nothing explosive. No shouting. No drama on the surface. Just silence. Distance. A clipped response that made it painfully clear. She wasn't here for him. And then, almost instantly, the energy shifted. Another reporter asked a question, and Clark's tone changed completely. She smiled. She leaned in. She gave a thoughtful, upbeat answer. It wasn't subtle. This wasn't about being tired or frustrated or caught off guard. This was surgical. A deliberate switch in tone that drew a clear line. You? Not welcome. You? Totally fine. And for a moment, the sports world held its breath. Because whether you love or loathe this new era of player empowerment, what Clark did was textbook image control. She didn't call Agnes out directly. She didn't have to. Her disengagement said it all. And in the media ecosystem, that kind of signal travels fast. Now, context matters. Scott Agnes didn't just report on an injury. He revealed details the team had specifically tried to keep quiet. Injury news isn't just gossip in pro sports. It's strategic information. Opponents adjust their gameplay based on it. Coaches protect it for a reason. So when a reporter drops that kind of news without team consent, that's not just a scoop, it's a betrayal. And Clark, along with her team, clearly didn't forget, but it wasn't just the injury leak. Agnes had also made divisive remarks about Clark's fan base, comments that many felt dismissed the community that's been rallying around her rise. Whether intentional or not, it struck a nerve. In sports media, where relationships are everything, those kind of hits add up. So when Clark met her with professional frost, she wasn't just being cold. She was drawing a boundary, publicly. And it worked. Not long after that press conference, Scott Agnes was out, fired. The timing was hard to ignore. Did Clark get him fired? No official word says that. But did his clash with one of the most talked about athletes in the game accelerate the decision? You don't need a PR degree to do that math. What's even more telling is how this interaction played out compared to others. Clark was warm, open, even charismatic with another reporter right after Agnes. That contrast wasn't accidental. It was a calculated signal. In this press room, access is earned and lost. This moment wasn't just about one journalist. It was about a shift in power. For years, reporters controlled the narrative. They shaped the headlines, edited the clips, decided how an athlete's words would be framed. But now, the players are playing the media right back. And they're doing it with silence, with tone, with selective engagement. That's a level of control that would have been unthinkable 10 years ago. Clark's strategy? It's simple. If you burn the trust bridge, don't expect a warm welcome. And when you're one of the most influential athletes in your league, that kind of control matters. Because it doesn't just affect how you're covered. It affects whether you're covered at all. Athletes today are more media savvy than ever. They know how coverage impacts their brand, their team, and their bottom line. They're not just answering questions. They're managing optics. And Clark's quiet shutdown of Agnes wasn't just a reaction. It was a message to every journalist watching. Play fair or lose access. What's wild is how subtle it all was. No dramatic blow-up. No confrontation. Just a shift in tone and a pointed pause. That's all it took to throw the whole sports media world into debate mode. And that debate, it's not going away. Some argue that journalists like Agnes are just doing their jobs, reporting the facts, chasing the story. And sure, that's journalism 101. But others say there's a difference between reporting and undercutting a team strategy, especially when the player in question is someone like Clark, whose impact on the WNBA is huge, both in fan engagement and media exposure. In a world where players are a product, their trust has become currency. And when you cash it in too early for a headline, don't be surprised if the door closes behind you. That's the real heart of this mess. Clark didn't slam Agnes in a tweet. She didn't call for a boycott. She just treated him like someone who broke trust, and the consequences followed. Swiftly. This brings up the bigger question. Should journalists chase every story, even if it means burning bridges? Or should they think long-term? Prioritize relationships, protect access, and consider the bigger picture? Old school journalism would say, report the facts. Period. But the sports world isn't old school anymore. Now, players have platforms. They have followings. And if they feel you've misrepresented them or their team, they can make it known. Subtly, strategically, and very publicly. It's a tough spot for media folks. Play it safe, and you risk missing the story. Push too far, and you might lose your seat at the table. The Agnes Clark moment lit up these questions, and while some saw it as a petty squabble, others recognized it for what it was, a line in the sand. Because let's be real, Clark isn't just an athlete. She's a brand, a franchise cornerstone. And like any high-profile figure, she understands that every media moment is part of the narrative. From press room posture to headline response, it's all calculated, all intentional. Her reaction to Agnes? That was branding. Not the flashy, sponsor-heavy kind, but the internal message. I know what you said. I saw what you did. And here's my reply. In silence. And for Agnes, it was costly. Whether or not that press conference was a final straw, it was certainly a high-profile moment that drew attention to his earlier reporting choices. And in an industry where perception is reputation, that kind of heat can be career-ending. The whole situation puts a spotlight on the fragile balance between journalism and access. When a reporter breaks sensitive news, it might win clicks, but it can cost trust. And in today's sports ecosystem, trust is everything. Athletes now use media the same way media once used them, as tools for influence, leverage, and brand control. And as Clark just demonstrated, they're very good at it. So, where does this leave sports journalism? On one hand, there's a danger here. If athletes only grant access to friendly media, we risk losing honest, critical reporting. But on the other hand, if reporters burn bridges for a scoop, they may find themselves iced out of conversation entirely. It's a tightrope. And Caitlin Clark just reminded everyone how thin that rope can be. So whether you're Team Clark or Team Journalism, the message is clear. This isn't the old game anymore. The The media dynamics have shifted, and power now flows both ways. Journalists can still break stories, but athletes, they can break silence. And sometimes that speaks louder than any headline. If you got thoughts on this one, let's hear them. Is this the new normal in sports media? Did Agnes cross a line? Or is Clark just using the system the way it's always used her? Drop a comment, hit that like button, share this with your group chat, and subscribe for more breakdowns of the chaos happening in front of the cameras and behind them. Let's not pretend this is just a bad vibes press conference. What went down between Caitlin Clark and Scott Agnes isn't just a personal squabble. It's a warning shot fired straight to the heart of traditional sports journalism. And here's the twist. It wasn't loud. It wasn't messy. It was cool, surgical, and controlled, which, in a way, made it even more brutal. Clark didn't need to lash out. She didn't need to call for a boycott or demand a retraction. She let her body language and tone do the heavy lifting. And that alone was powerful enough to get people talking, debating, and yes, even questioning whether certain reporters belong in that room anymore. That's the power dynamic now. Athletes aren't just reacting to media, they're managing it. And Clark? She's fluent in the language of control. See, the old playbook was simple. Reporters asked, players answered. Sometimes grudgingly, sometimes enthusiastically, but that was the deal. But these days, with athletes running their own platforms, building their own brands, and connecting directly to fans without middlemen, that deal's getting renegotiated. In real time, when Scott Agnes published those injury details the team had purposefully kept quiet, it wasn't just a journalistic decision. It was a test. And Clark's response? That was the answer. She could have blown up. She could have turned it into a headline-grabbing fight. But she didn't, because that's not how you keep the upper hand. Instead, she delivered a modern-day version of a PR power move. Strategic silence, followed by clear favor toward someone else. And if you were watching closely, the message was obvious. Her vibe with the next reporter was night and day different. She went from shut down and dismissive to open and warm. Same player, same press room, different treatment. And that contrast? That wasn't just for Scott Agnes. That was for everyone in the room. Welcome to the Caitlin Clark School of Media Relations. Reward the trusted, ice out the opportunists. But let's dig into the bigger question this opens up. Was Scott Agnes wrong to publish the injury news? Technically, no. Journalists report facts. Injuries are facts. If he had the info, and it was newsworthy, he had every right to publish it. But just because something is journalistically correct doesn't mean it's strategically smart, especially when you're covering a team that values privacy and a player with a carefully curated brand. Agnes wasn't dealing with a random bench warmer. This was Caitlin Clark, a face of the league, a lightning rod for attention, and someone whose fans track her every move, publishing sensitive info about her team, then turning around and criticizing the fans she brings with her. That's not journalism in a vacuum. That's provocation. And provocation has consequences. It's easy to say don't take it personally. But when your personal image is your career, and when media coverage directly shapes how you're perceived by fans, sponsors, and even teammates, it's not just business anymore. Clark's not just playing games on the court. She's playing a game off of it too. And in this particular game, she holds a lot more cards than a regional sports journalist. Let's talk trust. Because that's the currency everything in sports media is built on. You break a story today, but you might lose your source tomorrow. And in pro sports, losing access doesn't just cost you interviews. It costs you relevance. Athletes talk. Teams talk. Once your reputation shifts from respected reporter to loose cannon, it's hard to claw your way back. That's what makes this situation so much bigger than just Clark and Agnes. Because if players can cut off media access with a cold shoulder and a change in tone, does that put reporters in a bind? Are we headed toward a world where the only journalists who get access are the ones who play nice? It's a valid fear. But here's the flip side. If reporters blow up trust for the sake of a headline, they're gambling with their entire career, especially when the player on the other side has millions of fans, direct social media reach, and a team willing to protect their image at all costs. In this environment, everyone's walking on a tightrope. Let's not forget, this wasn't a one-off moment. Agnes didn't just stumble into this. There was already tension. The injury report just added fuel. And the fan base comments? That was a spark. Clark's fans are a big part of her success story. They show up, they engage, they push the WNBA into new conversations. When a journalist frames that energy as a problem or portrays it with a condescending tone, they're not just reporting, they're undermining. So Clark's reaction? That wasn't just about herself. That was about defending the broader ecosystem she's helping build. There's something deeper going on here, and it speaks to the evolution of athlete-media relationships. This isn't the 90s anymore. Players don't need reporters to tell their story. They have Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, podcasts, YouTube. If you burn them, they can walk away and bring the audience with them. The balance of power has shifted. Clark didn't issue a statement. She didn't call anyone out. She just refused to play along. And within days, Scott Agnes was reportedly out of a job. Whether the two events are officially connected or not, the perception is undeniable. When the most prominent player in the room freezes you out, and everyone sees it, your days might be numbered. So here we are. One calculated press conference has sparked a full-on debate. Are athletes killing journalism? Or are journalists crossing ethical lines in the name of scoops? The truth is, it's complicated. There's value in critical reporting. No one's saying journalists should only write puff pieces. But there's also value in trust, access, and context. If you know a team wants something kept quiet for strategic reasons, and you publish it anyway, you better be ready for the fallout. And the fallout is real. Clark's cold shoulder sent a ripple through sports media, and it won't be the last. This is the new model. Athletes who use every media moment as a form of branding, who use tone, posture, and who they answer to, signal approval or rejection, and who fully understand how those moments will be clipped, shared, and debated online. It's not just PR. It's power. Caitlin Clark isn't just playing basketball. She's playing chess. And while some may call it petty, others see it for what it is, strategic boundary setting in an industry that hasn't always respected boundaries. And here's the irony. Clark never had to raise her voice, never had to name names, but she managed to spark one of the loudest conversations in sports media this year. What does that tell you? It tells you that silence is a statement, that disengagement is a weapon, and that in 2025, controlling your narrative isn't just about what you say, it's about who you say it to. So next time you see a post-game press conference, look a little closer, watch the body language, track the tone, because those subtle moments, they're no longer just filler between games. They're the new front lines of sports journalism. And as Clark just showed us, they can change everything. Here's the part no one wants to say out loud. This wasn't just about Caitlin Clark and one rogue reporter. This was a public collision between two conflicting forces. Old school journalism and a new breed of athlete who doesn't need to play along to win. And when those two worlds clash, the one with more control over the narrative usually walks away clean. Because Clark didn't cancel Scott Agnes. She didn't have to. The power dynamic did it for her. Let's be honest. If this were a rookie or a bench warmer, maybe the fallout wouldn't be so dramatic. But when you're Caitlin Clark, a headline magnet, a ratings booster, and arguably the most important name in the WNBA right now, your influence goes beyond the court. You are the storyline. And when you subtly shut someone out, you're not just icing one journalist. You're sending a message to the entire media ecosystem. Play smart or play alone. And the media heard it, loud and clear. That kind of strategic disengagement, it's not petty, it's effective, because it forces reporters to reconsider how they interact with players. Is the scoop worth the burn? Is the exclusive detail worth being blacklisted in every press room going forward? We're seeing a turning point here, not just for sports journalism, but for journalism as a whole. The old formula, break the story, get the clicks, rinse and repeat, doesn't hold up when your subject has as much reach and as much control as a reporter. Scott Agnes made a textbook journalistic move. He published insider info, but that textbook, it's getting rewritten in real time. Because now, The consequences aren't just ethical debates in media circles. They're cold shoulders on camera and pink slips behind the scenes. And let's not forget the fans. Clark's fan base is loyal, fiercely so. When Agnes critiqued them, it wasn't just a bad take. It was a strategic misstep. These fans are part of Clark's brand now. They're not just supporters, they're stakeholders. Dismissing them is like mocking the people who bought tickets to your show, and then expecting a standing ovation. So yeah, when Clark went quiet on Agnes, it resonated. Fans backed her. Media folks took notes. And the fallout wasn't just personal, it was professional. This is where we land in that uncomfortable gray area. Should journalists be afraid to report the truth? No. But should they be prepared for the very real, very public consequences of breaking trust with the people they cover? Absolutely. Because athletes today aren't just athletes. They're brands. They're content creators. They're CEOs of their own public image. And if you think they're not watching how you frame them, how you talk about their fans, or how you leak behind-the-scenes info, think again. This isn't about being overly sensitive. It's about understanding that the balance of power has shifted. The athletes who used to need media to tell their stories, they don't anymore. They have bigger platforms than most sports outlets. They have control, and they're using it. Caitlin Clark just gave us a masterclass in quiet power. No drama, no yelling, just a cold shoulder that changed the conversation. And if you're in the business of covering athletes, that conversation is one you can't afford to ignore. Drop your thoughts below. Was Clark making a power move or being too reactive? Should Agnes have held back that report, or was he just doing his job? Hit that like. Share this with your group chat, and subscribe for more deep dives into the beautifully messy world of sports, media, and modern-day chaos. Because if this is how things are going now, just wait till next season.